Most maturation, as you know, takes place in large maturation facilities in central Scotland.
Yeah.
However, some distilleries still have maturation beside the distillery, and there's quite a debate about whether the distillery is the true distillery flavour or whether it's from the maturation complexes.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on this?
Well, my opinion from experience, because my experience is working for a company that has very large central sites, and with Scotland being such a small country, I would say where you mature it does not have a blind bit of difference. Doesn't impact the spirit whatsoever. But I think I'm on the extreme fringe of that opinion. I think whether you mature it in the Highlands at height, or you mature it on Speyside, or you mature it in large central sites in Scotland, I don't think it makes a difference. I think it's the wood that really impacts the difference. But other people have differences of opinion. But for me, my experience, I don't think it plays a role where you do your maturation. As long as it's in Scotland, of course, for the legal purposes, I don't think it makes a difference. Whether it's good, whether I like it, whether it's great for the industry, that's a different question. But in terms of producing that final whiskey, don't think it's important.
I disagree with you to a certain degree here. Why is Scotch whisky made in Scotland? I mean, it sounds like a daft question. One of the reasons is because the weather that we have, the temperature profiles that we have are conducive for that flavour profile that comes out of the wood. If we were in Kentucky, we're using the same woods.
Yeah.
We're using similar sort of spirits. We get bourbon.
Yes.
Because the temperature profiles are very, very different, and that facilitates different reactions, different diffusion rates for different congeners coming out of the wood, and different reactions within that maturing spirit. So I would say the weather and locality does make a difference, so long as you're making small amounts. As long as you have small warehouses, because at the end of the day, if you have a very large warehousing complex, you're going to be blending that whiskey together. Yeah. And it's a small difference that's going to be made will just get blended away, and you're not going to see it. The consumer isn't going to see it. It's not going to make any difference. But for small, and we're beginning to see a resurgence of the small distilleries. By small I mean about 500,000 litre capacity type of distillery, which is very small. They have the ability to mature beside the distillery, or very close to it, and that will make a difference. Small, not large.
Yes.
Because of the individual weather profile that they get there. For instance, I'm working with a distillery out in the Outer Hebrides. There, basically, they have cool summers and warm winters, if you like.
All right, okay.
They're not. It's a very mild. It's a mild,
yeah.
Very wet and very wet, very windy place out in the Outer Hebrides, but not the extremes of temperature, as you say, would see in the Central Highlands, which could freeze in the. It's minus 14, 15 is not unknown. Those hot summer days you get out on the moorland, where it goes up to 20 now and again. That's tremendous. That's a big difference.
So you think those, what I would maybe say, slight weather differences, maturation, of course, Scotland, Kentucky, India, huge differences.
Yeah.
Do you think those differences in relatively in different Scottish climates is enough to impact
to have a subtle
spirit?
difference? To have a subtle difference, it'll change. It changes the ingress and egress of vapours in and out of, particularly water vapour and atmosphere in and out of the cask. It changes the pressure inside the cask. Changing pressure inside the cask will change the amount that goes into the wood and the amount that comes out of the wood, because that's equally important, because it's diffusion that comes out. I wouldn't say that you'd be able to recognise this is a central
Right. Okay.
This is matured in the central
This is
area.
under Fife. This is matured in the Highlands. This is matured.
Exactly, because other factors will overwhelm that. The quality of the new make spirit, the wood policy, how much peating is had in there. It comes back to what I really believe about Scotch whisky. Scotch whisky is the sum of all its parts. It's not just. And these small differences all add up to big differences at the end of the day. Depends what product you're making, I think.
Well, that's what I'm hearing from you is yes, it makes a difference, and no, it doesn't make a difference.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly
so
what
if you're making a huge brand.
Yes, you're making.
And there's thousands and thousands of casks. Yeah, put them somewhere centrally.
Exactly.
But 1 or 2 casks here or there for this individual expression. You think that could make a difference?
I agree with you there. Depends on the product you're making. If you're making a big volume blend, what's important is Scotland.
Yes. In Scotland, anywhere in Scotland.
Because the weather, the average weather, because that'll be being matured, say, over 10 years or something like that, 12 years perhaps for some of the deluxe blends. It's important that it experiences Scottish weather.
Yes.
A warehouse is just to stop thieves. It doesn't stop the weather. It doesn't stop the temperature. It doesn't stop the humidity. But if you're making a malt, small volumes, where you can put together small parcels that just come from, say, an individual warehouse,
right?
Then you will get differences.
Because there's some of the,
but they'll be subtle.
Some of the marketing, maybe dare I say it, or certain brands have got their warehouses below sea level, and do you think that makes a difference in some of these brands?
Probably not.
In the volumes that we're talking about.
What's probably making the difference is that local weather, where that because that's the important thing for maturation. Because the weather, the temperature profiles and the humidity profiles, because that decides the diffusion rates and the reaction rates that go on within a cask. Also determines some of the loss rates as well. So you'll get differences in losses, very small amounts, and that will also affect strength within the cask,
which affects volatility,
which
solubility,
precisely. So over time you will get some differences. What you don't get is, say, if you're beside the sea, you get a maritime note, taste of the sea. If you're beside a pine forest, it will be more piney. If you're up in the moorland, it will be more moorlandy, whatever that is.
I'm thinking of a whisky now, made by the sea, salty, but matured in Fife.
Exactly. So, we can all think of examples like that. That's down to peating levels, down to cuts, down to recipe, down to the skill of the distillers themselves and that accumulated knowledge and putting that in.
Kind of going off piste here. But what do you think about palletised warehousing?
Palletised warehousing, your losses will go up slightly, but you get more casks in. So
you've got more losses over less time, more casks, so kind of the monetary balances it out.
The bad thing about palletised warehouses, from a maturation point of view, you've got one of the ends. Completely dry. And so you've lost all that, the congeners coming out of that wood.
So I'm kind of hearing anecdotally that losses are sometimes 2 or 3 times more.
I wouldn't know, not as much as that.
Not as much as that. Just what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, I've not seen that. But I mean, there might be cases that I'm unaware of, but I've not seen.
But just in certain instances.
Yeah. I mean, where you do get higher losses is at the top of the warehouse. The industry's gone from sort of 3 cask high warehouses to giant 3 bay warehouses, these massive big warehouses. And there's a big difference in the atmosphere, where if you ever go into one, they all feel quite cold. The atmosphere feels very stable, but actually at the top of the warehouse, it can go up and down in temperature as the sun comes in and out. And you're unaware of that because you never experience it. So I would recommend that you put some insulation on the roof of a warehouse to stop that. And there you get greater losses. Do you get differences in maturation? I don't know. It's simple. We couldn't find any, but then you need to look over. That's a 12, 15-year experiment.
Project, isn't it?
Because you can't do any comparison. You have to just look up in there. So we don't know. It's as simple.
But I think it's an interesting question, interesting point, because a lot of the industry is moving towards palletised, much easier to build
Yes.
a big empty shed and fill it than a racked warehouse, and much smaller footprint than a dunnage
Yes,
warehouse. So
well,
it's going to be used.
You get greater losses, and one of the reasons you get greater losses is got 2 bungholes in, because the bourbon guys will have always put a bunghole on the on the bilge, but you've got to put one on the end. So you got, and that's a major source of loss is the bungs. You might not look wet, but that's where it comes from. And plus, you've got the crows at the top is dry. Pressure difference, which is the atmosphere, changes the pressure of the gas, the headspace within a cask. Because of the huge volume of liquid there is within a warehouse, the liquid takes a long time to change temperature. So it lags about 3 days behind atmospheric temperature. Right. So if you have fluctuations of temperature which are greater than, that are shorter than a day, that just changes pressure, air pressure.
Oh, right, okay.
And so that can change the maturation profile because of that. Usually ending in greater losses because of that, because it's pushing stuff out rather than pushing stuff in, because there's no alcohol to push in, or very, very little. I say it's an open question, and one of the unknowns about how that affects flavour at the end of the day. My gut feeling is it can't do it any good. You know, it's not going to improve it.
Yeah, not going to improve things, but is it going to be a detriment? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But then, once again, you're talking about giant warehouses, and that's going to, the blender is going to take care of that by making sure that is.
And a lot of the ones you were talking about, where you think it might be a difference, a lot of these smaller distilleries, still going to be a lot of little dunnage warehouse next to the site, so it's still going to be done there. A lot of volume probably is being palletised, but some of that smaller volume might still be.
I mean, some companies, that's their policy is to keep racked. Callan and Edrington spring to mind. That's their policy is to do that, often based on cost. Looking at cost rather than maturation profile, but also they also believe that they get a better or more consistent product.
Yes, and they're putting up a lot of warehouses.
They're putting up a lot of warehouses. Yes, well, everybody is.
Yes,
I can see advantages and disadvantages for both. For a smaller warehouse, I personally would go for racked.
Right.
Because you got both ends in contact, and you're just going to get more wood congeners coming out, plus more char in contact with the spirits. Some people will have their sherry casks racked rather than
or dunnage or whatever.
Yes, and dunnage for that reason.
I was at a new distillery yesterday, and they're going for dunnage because they feel that's best way to mature, and it's the way they want to mature.
Yes.
But there's something about a dunnage warehouse, isn't there?
Yes.
It's just the best place.
It's just a lovely
in
place.
The universe.
Yes.
To wander about and see the casks and smell it, and there's something just unnice about a racked or a palletised.
Yes, it's a bit too clinical. It's a bit too clinical. I also feel unsafe with it, so there's about 7 high now.
Well, I used to manage ones at Ben Rennes which were 8, 9 high.
8, 9 now.
And I used to hate going up the top because I didn't like heights. So,
but also, I think that demonstrates just how good design casks are that can take that weight.
Yes.
It's awesome. How that double curve shape of the cask is
wonderful.
so well designed over time.
But it's just a wonderful process, maturation, full stop, isn't it? Wherever you do it, it's just...
Well, that's a big change, isn't it? From new make spirit, that's when you actually see the spirit appear, and that's when you get very interested in it, because you can actually see spirit. You actually see whiskey appearing at the end, particularly if you're involved in a new recipe or involved in a new distillery. Or that's the culmination, often of years and years of work and investment, and then you start to see it come out the other end. The excitement is just second to none.
It is, and at home I have a special shelf where I've got about 6 or 7 bottles from various sites, that were made while I was a manager.
All right.
So that's wonderful. Wonderful to have. It's such an exciting, exciting process. So.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Thank you.